Sorry this actually took so long. I've been trying to find new ways to extend this and then wrap it up perfectly. But let's begin. We continue our story at the Autobot base. Every Autobot is outside at Hotspot's Memorial, and we see Autobots standing side by side with each other or with respective partners. And pretty much the funeral is concluding at this moment, with the Protectobots being all able to say something gladly and proudly about their fallen brother and their commander, Hotspot. We then go inside the Autobot base a couple hours later, where Knockout is asking Breakdown, how does his new body feel? How does it function? To which Breakdown says he doesn't know. He feels stronger, faster, tougher, and obviously he's got these new weapons, but he doesn't know how to use them. But this is where Ironhide walks over and states, well, there's nothing like a little good old-fashioned training section. And, well, he and Breakdown go ahead and walk off. We then pan over to Jack, who's walking over to Jazz, and he asks him, hey, can I ask you about that favor? To which Jazz says, yeah, I mean, sure, shoot. Why not? Keep in mind, Jazz is kind of in a moment right now, as he did get to kill Starscream in the last chapter for Avenging Cliffjumper. And Jack asks him, so I've been able to ask out Sierra, and I've been wondering if, well, you know, and he looks at him like, are you seriously asking me to be a wingman? To give you a ride? And this is where Jack says, yeah. And this is where RC says, look, I'll sweeten the deal. You give him this little favor you promised, and maybe you'll get lucky later. To which Jazz looks at her and is like, you know what? I actually do think that is a pretty good idea. You know what, Jack? How about we go ahead and do that date right now? Grand Canyon sound cool? To which Jack is like, yeah. Oh, wow, that sounds great. And then he looks to RC, is like, so what does getting lucky on Cybertron look like? To which RC says, don't worry about it. Go ahead and enjoy your date. And this is where it pans over to Jazz telling Jack, hey, you better hurry up and get in. Grand Canyon is about to close in, well, about 15 minutes. So I suggest you get ready. We're about to head out and, you know, go early and stuff. Meanwhile, back on the Decepticon warship, everything is going quite swimmingly at the moment. It's calm. It's peaceful. And this is where Megatron and Onslaught walk into, I guess you could say, this ship's medical bay, if you will. And he asks him, is everything going to plan? And Onslaught says, Swindle, you got a report yet, or you just lacking and slacking? And this is where, Swindle pretty much says, well, these two were pretty sophisticated and complicated, but I got them working. Stand up, you two. And this is where we see Nemesis Prime and Stinger both walk over and kneel before Megatron, professing their loyalty, and Megatron can even see their Decepticon insignias, and he's actually quite pleased. And this is where Onslaught says he's actually been able to catch one of the Autobots out in the open. States they would be wonderful for a test run. And this is where Megatron says, do it, and do not come back empty-handed, or at least with any good results about these two. Otherwise, there will be consequences. This is where we head over to the Grand Canyon. Everything's closed at the moment. There's no guards, nothing around. And this is where we actually hear laughing and giggling as Jack and Sierra are both outside at the hood of Jazz, if you will, and they're pretty much enjoying each other's company. The date's going smoothly. And Sierra states, you know, for all this time, I thought you had a pretty exciting life, but I never thought this exciting. To which Jack kind of rubs the back of his head and says, yeah, well, that's me, having to deal with alien partners all the time. But as the two are just, you know, having a grand old time, this is where Stinger actually pulls up in Jazz's side view mirror. And Jazz is like, well, this is definitely not good, but things can't get worse from here. I could probably take him. However, this is where he also checks his other rearview mirror, and luckily he did, because Onslaught is getting in position and fires his top cannons. This is where Jazz transforms, grabs the kids, and shields them from the blast, and tells them to run. However, this is where Stinger transforms and tackles Jazz, kind of giving him a, I guess you could say, getting him like closer towards the Grand Canyon where he almost falls off. However, Jazz is able to quickly maneuver and then slam Stinger right into the ground. However, he's shot in the side by Nemesis Prime. Now, Nemesis is pretty strong and tough, and I still think he does give him a ridiculously hard time, but Jazz is able to not only outmaneuver him, but utilize his Sonic Blast to actually get the upper hand. This is where Onslaught then jumps in, and now we get ourselves a titanic 3 versus 1 battle. Jazz being able to utilize his skill and abilities, but he does get hit a couple of times, and this is because he had to shield, you know, the kids from Onslaught's blast. So he starts kicking, twirling, using his Sonic Blast and everything, and everything's going smoothly until Stinger actually utilizes his cannon and blasts Jazz right in the chest. This then sends him into Nemesis, who blasts him in the back, and then Onslaught comes in and stomps him into the ground. Jazz is wounded, but again is still capable of getting up and fighting. So Nemesis decides to take out his blade, but he gets shot right in the head and is sent tumbling by Ironhide, who says, yeah, you're not taking him. Or at least not anytime soon anyway. We still kind of want him around, right, Breakdown? Dude says, yeah, we gotta have the cool guy around and everything, even though I look way better than he does. To which Jazz simply laughs as Breakdown helps him up, and he says, you know, you guys could have came a whole lot sooner if you could. To which, this is where Jazz asks him, which one you want to take? Into which Breakdown looks at Nemesis, summons his hammer, and he says, I want that one. That one right there? Yeah, he's on mine. So Nemesis takes out his sword and actually rushes at Breakdown, and this is where they have a clash of weapons. However, due to Breakdown's better and more improved body, he's stronger, he's tougher, and he actually manhandles Nemesis and says, yeah, this feels good. And well, we then get Onslaught looking directly at Ironhide, and the two pretty much circle each other for a moment, both getting ready for what they know is about to be the legendary scrap of a lifetime. And this is where Ironhide says, well, you're just going to stand there, or you're going to take the first shot. And Onslaught doesn't even hesitate, straight up rocks Ironhide and sends him tumbling into the ground here. And he doesn't even hesitate and says, you're going to make this far too easy for me, Ironhide. Thought you were one of the toughest Autobots around. And he actually begins to try to like manhandle and pin Ironhide, but Ironhide shoots his cannons right into his gut and then proceeds to jump on Onslaught and begins wailing on him fiercely, straight up beating the absolute crap out of Onslaught's visor. This is then we pan over to Jazz fighting against Stinger. Now, Jazz is injured, yes, and Stinger is able to take advantage of that to a certain extent. However, Jazz having better fighting skills, better reflexes, and still having his Sonic Blast working, he's able to make quick work of Stinger, and he's actually fighting very seriously here because, again, he can't afford to be his more playful self. So he actually dismantles Stinger very quickly. This is where we then head over to Breakdown and Nemesis Prime, and Breakdown pretty much bashes his hammer against Nemesis' sword so hard that it shatters, and then proceeds to unleash every bit of his rocket shoulders as he can, and just simply lays into Nemesis Prime fiercely at this point. Seeing that his team is losing, Onslaught simply calls for a tactical retreat, saying that next time they meet, things won't go the same way, and simply leave through a ground bridge. Meanwhile, Jazz actually collapses and Breakdown is able to catch him, and he says, well, I hope the kids are okay. And this is where Jack and Sierra actually run out from the rock they were hiding behind and simply state, oof, you look rough, man. But this is where he looks to Sierra and he actually asks, so how was the date? Pretty awesome. I'd actually like to go through this, but maybe with a little less, danger. To which Jack says, yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, I try to do that sometimes myself. Friday. And so he walks back to Jazz, and, well, they both have to walk back to Jazz because Sierra's obviously got to get home somehow. And this is where Jazz says, good date, and Jack says, yeah, good date. Definitely gonna do this again. To which Jazz says, yeah, and let's make sure I don't look all battered and bruised from this one, right? And so we would head back to the Autobot base. Let's say it's about an hour later, and well, I think it's kind of obvious what's happening at this moment. Jazz has just finished getting repaired from Ratchet, and he smacks him on the back saying, thanks Doc, good as new. And Ratchet simply tells him, yeah, try not to get jumped again, to which Jazz says, yeah, no promises. And RC asks, so who were the two newcomers that you guys fought? And this is where Ratchet says it only stands to reason that these are the ones that Starscream had created, but now it seems Megatron's utilizing them to their fullest. And Optimus also notes, without a human partner. However, we do have some breaking news. And this is where he simply looks at Knockout and nods. And Knockout holds up an orb stating, we're going to get the last key back. But this isn't where we end off. No. We would head to a Decepticon mine where a miner actually unearths something very important to Megatron. The Insecticon hive. All of them. Every last Insecticon there, including the likes of Hardshell. And speaking of Hardshell, this is where he simply asks, take me to Megatron. And that's where we're going to leave it off here, you guys. How do you feel about the Insecticons finally being introduced, and how will they be vital for the Decepticons?